Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Radio 88 Keys Radio Hour, but I guess it's not really the Radio 88 Keys Hour. It's not the time. It's not even Friday. Yeah. It's Monday. Crazy. Well, you guys are here with your host, Sho.
And Noah.
And we are here with Taina Asili, a New York-based Puerto Rican singer, activist, filmmaker, and songwriter. So much. That's crazy. Here on the Radio 1851, we're happy to have her here. Today we're going to be talking about her upcoming album, Resiliencia. I want to make sure I don't butcher it.
That was beautiful.
And we're going to discuss the various impacts that she's had on the community and the world in today. So if you, I'm going to pass it over to her if she wouldn't mind introducing herself to the people. And all that stuff.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah,
thank you for showing up.
So on Friday, I'm getting ready to drop my new album, Resiliencia. And you said it right. I was actually debating when we made the album, like, are we going to call it Resilience? Originally, the project was called Resilience. And then I started to shift over to Resiliencia because I'm Puerto Rican. I wanted to represent a little bit more of the bilinguality of my, culture and of my roots, and decided to hit that. But I was like, are people going to be able to pronounce this? But we figured it's close enough, that we can make it work.
Good enough.
Yeah.
And if anyone has like a Spanish 101 background like I did, they'll be good. They'll be fine. Yeah. Most definitely.
I think my name's harder, I think.
Yes. Good.
All right. Do you want to start with the questions still?
Oh, yeah. All right. So, may I go?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. All right. So you've been making political based music since you were a teen, if I'm correct.
Yes.
Right? So how did you develop such a strong passion, and to spread your political opinions and political change to the world? What was your inspiration for that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I like to say, I talked about my Puerto Rican upbringing, and, one of the things that is exciting about this album is that it really is very different from how I began in terms of looking at, my own story, right? So Resiliencia is, just to rewind back a little bit before I hit that question, Resiliencia is an album where I interviewed women of color around the U.S., Canada, and Puerto Rico about their stories of resilience. Right. And then I composed music based on those stories, right? So they're almost like biographical. Woven in is my own story in there too, right? But it's really more based in the teachings of the wisdom of all of these amazing women of color in my larger community. As a national touring artist, I have a lot of different communities,
Of course.
And so, that's where I'm at now. But, how I kind of started was really writing about my own experiences, my own experiences as a woman of color, a girl of color growing up in upstate New York, which was, I grew up in a very white community. I had to deal with a lot of racism, sexism, homophobia growing up. And so my songs in my early years, which I performed in a punk band for a good 8 years, it was really telling my own story, and of course other people related to that story. So from there, I was able to see the power that comes from sharing your story and telling your truth, and how people can feel a sense of connection, a sense of community when I speak my truth, right? So at around 17 really is when I started to see how this was playing out, in terms of my own songwriting. But if I go back a little bit further than that, where I really got my inspiration is from my Puerto Rican upbringing, my roots. I grew up in a household where music and culture were everywhere, were celebrated, honored. My parents were the founders of the Latin American Student Union at Binghamton University, which is in upstate New York. And they were all about, they were inspired by the Young Lords and the Black Panthers. And my father used to see Malcolm X speak, So, when you think about student groups, I don't know if you have student groups on this campus today. Yep. I often say to students, how do you get involved in a student group? On this campus, I'm going to guess you go to some type of student association, you sign a piece of paper, something like that. But this time, in their time, it fought through protests and demonstrations, and really, it was a radical act to take up space like that, as Latinx people. So, this was the tradition, right? And that was passed on. And through that, they used cultural arts as a way to affirm our identity, as a way to take up our space, as a way to organize. And this was something that was also passed on to me and my sister in particular as we were growing up. Mm-hmm. My father was a singer, and he loved to sing doo-wop. Was one of his jams. And so he would teach us about harmony, you know, and what does it really mean when you're singing harmony? You're having to listen to somebody else, right? You're having to listen deeply to somebody else and figure out what your tone is, right? And match it to theirs, but still be your own, right? And still hold your own and ride that together, you know? So my sister and I were taught how to do that at an early age. And, you know, to me, that's a teaching within itself. So, you know, we had the political, we had the cultural, and then we just had like teachings of that art form. My father was a Latin jazz conductor, and he loved also to play the congas. My mom was a beautiful dancer. She loved to dance salsa, and they were both keepers of this Puerto Rican folkloric tradition that descends from our African and Taino, which are the native people of Puerto Rico, who I'm named after, our ancestors, right? So they passed on these traditions, generation and generation, centuries. These traditions have been passed on, really, landing me in today. So, you know, that was sort of their story that led me to my story. My story was different from theirs. I didn't grow up in New York City. I didn't grow up in Puerto Rico. I am a New Yorican, upstate New Yorican. And for me, like I said, my story was about confronting this racism in this particular way that I was experiencing. Right. So punk rock, that rage, that rebellion, all of that was a part of it. I should say that in between there, I was also trained in opera and by a Peruvian opera singer. And so I had all kinds of like music running through me.
Yeah, so many factors go.
Yeah, and I grew up, you know, in the '90s. We had, you know, R&B was like popping. We had hip hop, you know. And speaking of hip hop, you know, one of the groups that I loved. Do y'all know Public Enemy?
Of course.
Please.
Okay. Come on.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. So DJ Johnny Juice, who's one of the producers / another DJ in Public Enemy, he recorded with me on this album as well. So him and I have a song together called La Alegría. And, you know, it's just, again, all that full circle. So coming back, you know, with Resiliencia, with the title track of the album. And forgive me for talking a little bit too long. I want to hear your other questions.
This is your interview.
I'm on a flow
Please.
now. You know, Resiliencia, so just to like come full circle, is a blend of all of that, right? So Resiliencia, the song, you know, the word means resilience.
Yes.
And the song, you'll hear the punk rock rage, right, in these guitar riffs, and you'll hear my Afro-Latin roots in the rhythms at the beginning and in the middle of the song. And you'll hear that it's sung in Spanish, right? But you also, you know, hear the political, you know, and the cultural roots woven into the lyrics. So that's, you know, that's what my music is today.
That was really,
that was a great answer.
Awesome. That was so great.
Thank you.
Really love that.
Okay, so going into more of your inspirations and influences, Barbara Smith and, correct me if I'm saying this wrong, Naomi Jaffe?
Naomi Jaffe.
Jaffe.
Yeah.
You state them as being like very significant people in your life. Like what kind of impact and influence have they had like on you?
Oh, so much. So I live in Albany, New York, right? And I live in a community that has this amazing, rich history. You know, Albany was one of the stops on the Underground Railroad. Harriet Tubman was in Albany, New York, right? Yes. So, you know, we have like a really powerful, rich history of resistance in our community. As, you know, we probably can find amazing, powerful, rich history. I mean, most definitely in Philadelphia. I mean, forget about it. But, you know, for me, I wanted to highlight the history and the present day reality of activism and social justice in my community, but not just my community. So what you're referencing in that question is really my music video, No Es Mi Presidente, and my song, a single that I released in 2017, I believe. And this is a song, No Es Mi Presidente means not my president.
Right.
And I wrote this song after performing at the Women's March on Washington, and I also performed at the Disrupt J20. These were both, protests against the inauguration of Trump. Mm-hmm. And I after I left the Women's March, which was like, powerful, amazing. There was like 1 million people right in front of me. Yeah. I'm feeling this rage. I'm feeling this resistance. And I leave there, and, part of me was like, I want to carry this energy of resistance with me, and I want to share it. Mm-hmm. I wanted to write a protest song that really shared that. And I wanted to create a video to go with it. Right. So what I did was I wrote the song No Es Mi Presidente, which is a bilingual song in Spanish and English. And it's, the lyrics are, the chorus is No es mi presidente, no representa la voz de mi gente. It's like this kind of, it is about the president. But really, if you look at the lyrics, and moreover, the video, the music video for it, which, premiered in Rolling Stone and got a lot of press, that music video, what it is it's highlighting the resistance movement. So in my community, we have these amazing resistance movements, and two of those pillars for me have been Barbara Smith and Naomi Jaffe. These are two elders in our community. There's many elders, but these are two elders in my community in particular who have been leaders in movements for social change. So Barbara Smith, Black feminism, author, writer, organizer, world renowned for her work, but lives in my community, and it's such an honor and a blessing. So I asked her to be a part of that music video, and she said yes, thankfully. Her and I have worked together on organizing around mass incarceration and other issues as well. Naomi Jaffe is a very close mentor of mine. Naomi was a former member of an organization called the Weather Underground, which was an organization that were white people that were doing anti-racist organizing and in solidarity with some of those social movements that I mentioned earlier that were happening in the 1970s. Later on, and still today, she has been an important person in the movement against mass incarceration and for prisoner justice. So, as you mentioned in my introduction, I'm an activist in my community, and these are people that I organize with. These people have taught me so much. Today, I think, we have some amazing social movements, and social media has played an important role in them. So if we look at Black Lives Matter and the hashtag Black Lives Matter and the opportunity that social media has had to bring that to the forefront, Me Too, right? But these movements didn't come out of a vacuum.
Right.
They have a historical context and a history. And these two women that you mentioned, they were and are pioneers in they continue to carry the torch, placing it in our hands, and now I placing it in the hands of the next generation to keep it moving forward, right? So for me, I think that it's really important that we listen to and pay attention to the people who have come before us, who have laid the groundwork, and really learn from them. I think it's important to get interested and involved in things on social media, but it can't just stay in social media. And we have to be intergenerational in the work that we do if we want to really bring justice and healing into our world. These elders have so many important and powerful teachings, and I lean into them all the time. I call Naomi all the time when I got something going on, and I'm like, Naomi, I need your help. I'm so blessed. I'm so blessed. So that's what they mean to me, and I'm grateful that I got a chance to feature them in my music video.
I remember the music video. Like it was really, really powerful.
Thank you.
Seeing the cutting from the TV being smashed
with a sledgehammer
to all the very inspirational people that you mentioned.
And it's like you said, that there's the civil rights movement wasn't that long ago. Things like that. Those activists are still around, and it's very important that we, as the new generation, continue to put that work in that they started before us.
That's right.
So you got to keep that in mind. A little bit of a different twist on the 88 keys today, but we love it. And like you just mentioned, you smashed it. No Es Mi Presidente. You already got into this, but I just wanted to know, how do you feel knowing like such powerful work has been received and has had such wide national acclaim? Because we have like even the Huffington Post and Billboard
Rolling
magazine,
Stone.
they had ranked you high on their list for what was it, freedom fighting bands and songs of protest and resilience by Latino artists. So how does that like?
It's a gift. I think that there have been times where history ebbs and flows in terms of how like the mainstream embraces protest music and how the mainstream embraces these themes, and we live in a time I think where people are ready and waiting for something more than love songs or something more expansive than what we even think of love songs, because I consider those songs are love of my community, love of justice, love of healing, love of so. But I think we're ready for something more.
Yes,
and I think that this is an exciting time to be an artist that's offering that. So it's exciting because like it helps me to open doors to bring my music and message farther and wider. So one of the things that it allows me to do is, for example, travel to colleges and universities across the nation and get to speak to students like you and be able to workshop with them and have dialogue with them about these topics. And it also allows me to play in larger venues and be able to have more people hear my music. I'm getting ready to perform at Carnegie Hall with Toshi Reagan, or playing at a festival, Providence, PVD festival in Providence, Rhode Island, or, whatever different opportunities that come up. It allows me to get my music heard farther and wider. And that means that the teachings that I'm bringing, in particular with Resiliencia, where I'm like, it's not just me, I'm bringing like, all these teachings with me of all these different women. It allows me to just share that more.
Yes, definitely. Of course, we want to spread that message that you bring with you everywhere we can. And as such, let's play Es Mi Presidente. You guys definitely should go check that out on Spotify. You have it's on under Taina Asili y la Banda Rebelde. See?
Yeah.
Okay, so check that out in there. It's called Es Mi Presidente. We're gonna play it for you guys right now. Thank you. We'll be back. Peace. And you're back on with the radio, 88 Keys Radio Hour, but it's not really the 88 Keys Radio Hour because it's not Friday and it's not our hour. But it's okay because we're here with...
Still the same show.
Still the same show. Still the same show. Still the same people. You're with your host, Show.
And Noah.
And we are here with Taina Asili. She's answering some questions for us. Noah, you want to go ahead and take it away?
Yeah. So... Resiliencia?
Yep.
Am I saying that right?
Yep.
All right. So
Spanish
it has
101.
like a personal... Yeah. So it has like a personal touch. Like it seems like it stems from like a various like personal stories with you, and like stories you've heard from like women of color in your life. So what is like the most impactful story like for you?
There's a reason why I chose Resiliencia over Resilience, as I was mentioning earlier. And part of that was that in the midst of working on my album, which I've been working on this since I was just actually looking at it. 2016 is when I received a grant from the local art center where I live, and a residency, an artist residency. So I started out with 5 women in my local community in upstate New York. But in the midst of all this project that I was working on, Hurricanes Irma and Maria hit Puerto Rico, right? And I had to use this opportunity in my art to offer something back to my people. You know what I mean? And I decided that I needed to go there and really witness and document what was happening, because there wasn't enough being documented about what was going on in Puerto Rico. Particularly at that time, there was, almost no electricity, no running water, little access to food, little access to medicines. And that's just, a little bit of the story. And of course, there was a lot of neglect by the U.S. government in terms of support for Puerto Rico. So I wanted to find out what was going on there. And I decided to go there with my partner in crime, Gaetano Vaccaro, we came with just 2 cameras and my cell phone. And we decided to go across the island and interview, people I know, particularly these 4 women of color, about their stories of resilience. And I also talked to my family lived there and, other people that I know there. So it wasn't just them that I spoke with. I really wanted to understand the bigger picture. But these particular stories were very, very powerful to me. We started off in, I think we started off in Loíza. Did we start off in Loíza? With Dilcia Pagan, who is a former Puerto Rican political prisoner, which for those of you listening, if you don't know, Puerto Rico is a colony of the United States, right? So we don't have, voting rights in presidential elections. We don't have a real voting representation in Congress. A lot, that's like a whole nother long story, right. But people have been fighting for independence for Puerto Rico. And Dilcia was one of those people who fought for independence for Puerto Rico. And because of her work, she was incarcerated for basically 20 years. Wow. And so she was freed. I was a part of that movement, my younger years to help free her, befriended her a decade ago, and had the opportunity to come and interview her about what it was like from her perspective. When I got to Dilcia's house, she had a hole in her roof. There was water leaking in. Things were in disarray. Her community is in an area where there's a lot of people of African descent that live in that area. And that area was hit by both, so there's a powerful, rich history there. But that area was hit by Irma and Maria. Mm-hmm. And it was very badly devastated.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, very badly devastated. So, I think going there was a very emotional experience. Speaking with her, who is an elder who didn't and doesn't have a lot of support. We have to, I think this is like my theme of the night, but we have to support our elders, she was struggling to take care of herself, right. So going there, we, filmed her, and we also helped her with things, and, went to the, gave her stuff, and, tried to support her in any way that we could while we were there. We also ended up starting a campaign for her, an online campaign to help her financially, to make it through. But she spoke about, the history of Puerto Rico and the history of Loíza and how that relates to today and the situation that's happening in Puerto Rico, because we like to think that Puerto Rico is what happened there in terms of Irma Maria are natural disasters, so-called natural disasters. But we like to think, we consider them unnatural disasters, because what happened in Puerto Rico, and this is a theme that really, as we went across the island and spoke with folks, this was something that everyone said, is that what happened with these hurricanes, it compounded a disaster, an unnatural disaster, an economic devastation that has been happening in Puerto Rico for a long time, and so and also climate change, right, as the other part of that unnatural disaster. So, Dilcia spoke about that. I went to visit my friend, Marta, who lives in Ay Bonito, Puerto Rico, and she is a longtime activist who's also blind, and spoke about what it was like for her in the aftermath of Puerto Rico as somebody who is blind, to move through that experience where there's no, she relies heavily on electricity. She relies heavily on the computers and the internet and telephone, and she didn't have access to any of that. So she was extremely isolated up in the mountains, and there was no transportation and no public transportation. So she was really isolated out there. I also have a documentary that I created, with this album I've started to create these different documentaries that talk about these stories. But speaking with my friend Yasmin in Moca, Puerto Rico, on the west coast of the island, talking about what it was like for her as a mother of 2 young boys, surviving that. It was just very impactful. And, to me, the teachings that I learned about what the thing that Yasmin said. And I hate to give you this long answer,
No,
but
please.
it's really, to me, the crux of this all. Yasmin and I talked about bioluminescence. So bioluminescence, I'm not a scientist. I'm not sure we can define it. But if you think about like lightning bugs, okay, about that bioluminescence, that glow that comes from the lightning bugs. We also have these bioluminescent bays in Puerto Rico. It's something the most amazing. They glow at night. Really powerful. But we talked about, she spoke specifically about these insects in Puerto Rico that are lightning bugs, but they're endangered and they're specifically native to Puerto Rico. And they emit light, and she spoke about this as a metaphor for our people, that when everything is taken away from us, when all of our resources are taken away from us, only then can we really see our inner light, the inner light that we carry. So she spoke about that as that type of resilience that our people had, because even in the midst of this unnatural/natural disaster, people were sharing resources. People were lifting up one another and supporting one another, right? And it was beautiful to witness that too. So that song, Resiliencia, really encompasses all of those teachings. And that's why I decided to name the album Resiliencia.
That was
a great answer.
Inspiring.
Thank you.
It's really wonderful that we have artists like you who are willing to use your platform to not only like present stories that need to be heard, but stories that deserve to be heard. And like you said, there's the neglect, and we're always hoping to put that awareness out so that people can hear that. So why don't we just play Resiliencia now for the people so they can hear that and hear the the emotion and message that you had behind that, like you said. So we'll be right back with more questions for Taina. Stay tuned, guys.
Welcome back. This is Noah with 88 Keys, and I'm here with
Show
and Taina Asili as our guest. So right back into the questions. You worked a lot with the Albany Social Justice Center for your project No Es Mi Presidente. What was it like working with like that community for that project? Like, because I know that's like where you grew up, like, or where you live, and like, what's it like working with that kind of community?
Yeah, so the Albany Social Justice Center is a center that's been around for decades. I'm gonna guess they're coming up on their 35th year anniversary, so 35 years. And it's important, these centers, these actual physical spaces where we can meet and like really connect with each other one-on-one. I think social media, again, it's really powerful. It's like important, but human connection is really essential. Really getting to see one another, get to know each other, look into each other's eyes, connect with one another. It's really important. So, I, have been a part of an organization called Capital Area Against Mass Incarceration, which is an organization that organizes against mass incarceration. And we would meet at the Albany Social Justice Center. So I wanted to, as I was writing No Es Mi Presidente, bring us into that space so that we could, just kind of really feel authentically that history of social justice movements, because all these different organizations meet there all the time. So I wanted to bring that in. Also, logistically speaking, it's a space that's affordable and available, for a shoot on a shoestring budget, which, as a person that's like grassroots, I'm not getting paid. lots of money for my music videos. You know, I'm making them myself. I'm directing, producing. Gaetano, my partner in crime, who also plays guitar with the band, and is co-songwrites with me, is doing the filming of it. And, you know, we're very like DIY, you know? So it was a space that we could actually afford and was accessible to us, which is important to have these spaces. You know, it's really great that here on this campus, I presume, like, you can reserve spaces and get spaces, but, you know, in community, that's harder to come by, you know, and I can tell you that when I lived in West Philadelphia for many years, you know, finding those spaces are hard. It's hard to do. So that's why I decided to use that space.
Awesome. It says here, I have here that you've worked with like a lot of other artists, such as like Alicia Keys, Janelle Monáe, Talib Kweli, Toshi Reagan, who you mentioned earlier, Angela Davis, Cornel West. The list goes on. What is like working alongside those artists, other artists? How does that? What are your thoughts on that? And like, how do you feel that those collaborations help spread your influence and your importance of social justice? You know,
I learn a lot as an artist by watching other artists.
Right.
You know, I am somebody who, as I said, I'm grassroots. You know, so for me, part of what I do when I get these opportunities is I see this as like a mentor, you know, like I can, to somebody to look to really watch what they're doing, you know. And so I watch, you know, when I go see somebody in concert or when I'm performing, you know, with somebody, for example, I'm going to be looking at what they're doing on stage. One of the things I love about being behind the scenes when I'm performing with somebody or opening up for somebody is that I get to see it all from beginning to end. So I'm backstage. I get to watch, you know, I get to watch how they're communicating with their musicians. I get to watch how they're prepping and getting ready to hit the stage. And then I got to watch that performance up close and be able to really learn from them. And I've learned so much. I have learned so much. So, you know, in terms of the artists, you know, like Talib or Toshi Reagan or, you know, I mean, so many others that I've had the opportunity to open for, Tom Morello, or, you know, the list goes on. You know, it's really, you know, these artists are also artists that are known in their genres.
Right.
But they are doing social change work. You know, they are bringing those powerful messages that the people need and doing it in a way that's fun and doing it in a way that's accessible to a lot of different people, of a lot of different generations. So it's, you know, I pay attention to that too. Yeah. So, you know, it's a learning experience. And of course it's like hella fun.
Of course. I love about these artists. I love Talib Kweli. Love him.
I'm not gonna lie, you know, my heart skips a beat and I get really excited and, you know, fangirl out a little bit, and that's fun too. You know, it's like I've been in this game a minute, so it's like an honor when I get to share the stage with these folks. Yeah.
So those artists you're saying, of course, are like very like politically and socially like they make a lot of statements, just as you do. And so like two songs you have, like Even If and En La Verdad, they cover like the serious topic of the Me Too movement. And us and the listeners here, we're all college students, and like there's a lot of courage involved in like doing things like that, like talking about that kind of thing. So do you have any advice for like to give anybody who's struggling with such an experience?
To give somebody who is struggling with such an experience, you know, it's hard to say exactly, you know, in terms of like, you know, what kind of experience and what kind of supports. You know, I would be curious to know what kind of supports exist here on this campus. You know what I mean? Because I'm going to guess, you know, one of the awesome things about the different feminist movements that have existed in the U.S. is that particularly, you know, how they folded into colleges and universities, creating, you know, there's in many of the colleges and universities that I visit, there are feminist organizations they're carving out space and resources for people to be able to access the resources needed if you are somebody who has survived sexual violence or sexual assault. You know, for me, I am a survivor, and, you know, I was young when I had that experience. And for me, it was scary to tell people, it was scary to tell anyone, and so I held that in for a long time. And with that, I felt a lot of shame. I felt like it was my fault, that it was, that whatever I did, that it was something that I deserved because I must have done something, I was too sexy, or I was too this, or I shouldn't have gone with this person late at night alone in this spot, all these different things that I internalized. And so I was scared because I thought I had done something wrong, So for me, I think it's important that one of the reasons I wrote Even If is that one is, most of the songs are biographical on Resiliencia, really speaking to other people's stories. That one is a little bit of my own, because even today when I experience sexual harassment, for example, or, different types of experiences like that, I still go back a little bit to that. Like, is it my fault? Should I not have, what if I didn't, maybe this wouldn't, if I hadn't done this, maybe this wouldn't happen. It's in there so deep that even now, in the person that I am now, I lean into that, and so I have to remind myself that it's not my fault. It doesn't matter. It's not my fault. So, I think that just starting with that place, and then seeing who are people who might be safer spaces for you to be able to reach out to support, for support. Would be, I think, the best place to start.
Most definitely. Most important thing is to reach out for support. Always.
Yeah. I'd agree with that.
So,
so talking about Even If, I think we're going to play Even If now.
Let's please.
Yeah.
And we'll be back with more questions. If not, we might just, how much time do we have? A couple minutes.
But
we'll definitely be back. So stay tuned. All right, thank you.
Touch me or objectify, 'cause then it's not created in your mind. Come at me again and I will take you down. I will take you down. I will take you down. Come at me again and I will take you down. I will take you down. I will take you down. Come at me again.
Welcome back. You guys are here with the 88 Keys Radio Hour, except it's not the 88 Keys Radio Hour because it's not our hour and it's not our day. But it's still the same show. You're here with your host, Show.
And Noah.
And we are joined with Taina Asili. She's been answering questions for us all night. We want to thank her for joining us today and answering all our questions. We know we asked a lot.
I love it.
Thank you for your message and just inspiring us here in the station, and most definitely the people at home. I'm sure of it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
And before we wrap up, we just wanted to mention that she'll be performing with her band La Banda Rebelde at the Rotunda on April 17th to celebrate her release of her album, which will be April 19th. And and with that, is there any final thoughts that you want to bring to the station? Anything else you want to mention?
What I didn't get to mention is that I lived in West Philadelphia for almost 10 years, and Philly is a huge part of my life.
Right.
So one of the reasons why I'm doing Resiliencia, the album release, which by the way is also going to feature a local Philly band. They're called Interminable. They are also another fusion amazing group. One of the reasons why I want to do it here is because Philly is such an important home for me. It was such an important place that influenced me, influenced my music, influenced my politics, influenced everything. This was my training ground. This is where I became an adult, if you will. And so, for me, it's very exciting to go back to the Rotunda. I don't know if you guys have ever been to the Rotunda, but the Rotunda in West Philly is just this awesome community venue. Remember we talked about the social justice center and having those spaces. The Rotunda is one of those spaces. It's not a social justice center, but it's a community art center that has all kinds of events all the time. And when I lived here, there weren't a lot of spaces for artists like me. So the Rotunda was one of those spaces, and that was accessible, affordable, and interested and ready to have artists like me join. So I'm just grateful to come back home and to come back to the Rotunda and do this, celebrate this labor of love with, all my community here. So I hope, students listening come through. If you do, definitely say hello. Tell me that you heard me on the show.
Most doubt.
Yeah.
So yeah, and with that, we just want to once again say thank you to Taina Asili. Thank you guys for listening at home. Make sure you guys check her out on Spotify, check her out on YouTube, and you're definitely going to hear some more of her songs on our show.
Oh,
and I got my album is pre-released right now on Bandcamp. So if you go to Bandcamp, you can get down you can get the Plant the Seed and Resiliencia, 2 tracks from the album right now, and then on April 19th you'll get the whole thing. Yes, ma'am. Look for all of that good stuff. And once again, thank you guys for listening. We'll see you guys Friday. Not this Friday, next Friday, because we're not here next Friday. Next Friday. We're not here this Friday. Next Friday, 5 to 6, you'll be here with the 88 Keys with your host show.
And Noah.
And we'll see you guys then. All right. Thank you. Peace.